Shocking 85 Part 1. The journey begins. Chapter 1. Home sweet home. Tunda reclined in his leather office chair, staring at the shiny Nigerian flag emoji on his phone. Kemi had sent it to him in the middle of the day, with a note that read, "It's time." She didn't even need to spell it out. For 30 years, they'd lived in the US, raising two kids who thought that jollof rice was a Saturday-only dish, and growing careers that left them little time to think about Nigeria. But Kemi's message was clear. Their homeland was calling, and it was calling with a vengeance. As he sat there, considering the possibilities, Kemi burst into the room. "We need to make a list, Tunda. Do you realize how long it's been since we've been back? We'll need, I don't know, everything." "Everything?" Tunda echoed, laughing. "You know they still have stores in Nigeria, right?" "Oh, Tunda, don't be smart," she chided, brandishing a notepad. "The kids will have to look after the house, and we need to pack all our essentials. Do you remember what it was like, the humidity, the mosquitoes?" Tunda sighed, patting his bald head as if to remind himself how much his hairline had receded since he last faced Nigerian humidity. Fine, we'll make a list, but please, let's not go overboard." An hour later, Kemi had assembled enough supplies for what looked like a 6-month survival mission into the wilderness. "Do we really need all this, Kemi?" he asked, eyeing the mountain of bug spray, hand sanitizers, sunscreen, and an entire collection of sun hats. "Oh, we definitely do. You don't remember Auntie Biola's stories about malaria, do you? That's why you're being so casual about this." Auntie Biola also said she was 26 for 10 years straight, Kemi. "She was full of stories," he replied, smirking. Kemi rolled her eyes and started listing out their outfits. "We'll need clothes for church, of course. You know how my cousins love to turn up for service." "Yes, but why do we need 6 outfits each? We're only staying for 2 Sundays." Tunda protested, holding up a bright yellow agbada she had pulled from the back of their closet. It looked like it had been waiting for the moment to shine for decades. "Oh, Tunda, you're hopeless. The family will take photos, and you can't repeat outfits in photos. Besides, this is our first time back. They'll be expecting us to look, well, like we're from America." "Right," he muttered, eyeing the agbada with suspicion. "But do we really need to look like walking billboards for American fashion?" "Oh, don't be silly," she said, holding up a large floppy hat. "They'll be thrilled. Now, let's move on to snacks. I heard people in Nigeria have a hard time finding good, healthy snacks, so I bought a few bags of granola," Tunda snorted. "We're going to Nigeria, Kemi, not the Sahara Desert. They have food there. It's actually the whole point of going back, remember? Yam, egusi soup, proper plantains. Did you forget what Nigerian food tastes like?" "Oh, no, I remember. But these are, just in case, snacks," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "You know, for emergencies." Tunda folded his arms. "Emergencies, like what? In case a roasted corn vendor jumps out and force feeds us?" Kemi shook her head, ignoring him as she added the granola bars to their luggage pile. "Trust me, when we get there, you'll be grateful I thought ahead." Just then, their daughter wandered into the room, eyebrows raised as she took in the chaos. "Are you guys moving out?" she asked, looking at the luggage, piles of mosquito repellent, and what appeared to be a fully stocked pharmacy. "No, honey, we're just visiting," Tunda replied with a smile. "Your mom seems to think we need a lifetime supply of everything for 2 weeks in Nigeria." Kemi snapped her notepad shut, looking affronted. "You don't understand. We're going to see family we haven't seen in decades. We can't just show up empty-handed. And speaking of which," she picked up a shopping bag filled with gifts, American chocolates, phone chargers, hand creams. "Your cousins are getting these as souvenirs." Their daughter picked up a box of chocolates and grimaced. "Mom, this chocolate is for Halloween. You're giving Nigerian cousins Halloween candy?" "Yes. It's exotic," Kemi insisted, as Tunda tried to stifle a laugh. Finally, the preparations wound down. They took a step back to admire the suitcases, lined up like soldiers in the hallway, each one bursting at the seams with things they probably didn't need. "You know," Tunda said, placing an arm around Kemi, All this fuss just reminds me of the times we traveled to America as kids, with our parents overpacking everything for us. Here we are, doing the same thing," she laughed. "What can I say? The tradition lives on." As the departure day grew closer, the reality of the trip sank in. They were finally going back. They were about to dive headfirst into a world both familiar and foreign, with cousins and friends who would be eagerly waiting at the airport, ready to squeeze the life out of them in welcome. And somewhere else in Lagos, three clueless young men, Boniface, Lawal, and Ojo, were equally excited. They didn't know who the couple was or even where they were coming from, but one thing was clear. Their ticket to a big payday had just booked a flight from America. Chapter 2. Family warnings. As soon as word spread through the family grapevine that Tunda and Kemi were planning a trip back to Nigeria after 30 years, advice, warnings, and unsolicited tips came pouring in from all directions. Everyone had an opinion, most of it exaggerated, some of it bordering on absurd, and all of it given with the utmost seriousness. The first warning came from Kemi's auntie Biola, who called as soon as she heard. "Kemi, my dear, you're going to Nigeria, Abby?" Auntie Biola's voice was grave, as if she were preparing Kemi for a journey to the moon. "Yes, Auntie, we thought it was time. 30 years is a long time, you know," Kemi replied cheerfully, but Auntie Biola was having none of it. You think it's like here? Don't forget, my dear, the sun in Nigeria is different. It's not like this gentle American sun. Oh, it's sharp. It will slice through you. Make sure you pack your SPF 1000 sunscreen, and take a hat. You don't want people to be calling you roasted corn by the time you come back." Kemi stifled a laugh. "Auntie, don't worry. We'll stay in the shade." Auntie Biola wasn't finished. "And be careful about what you eat. These days, people put all kinds of things in their food. Only eat what you have cooked yourself, or what you see being cooked in front of you." Kemi could barely get a word in as Auntie Biola continued her list of cautionary tales, each one more dramatic than the last. "And don't let anyone bless you on the street. You think they're praying, but that prayer can be for trouble. Just wave and walk away, you hear?" Kemi thanked her auntie for the advice and hung up, shaking her head. Tunda, who had been listening to Kemi's side of the conversation, raised an eyebrow. "Roasted corn?" he asked, chuckling. Kemi laughed. "Apparently, the sun in Nigeria is sharp, and we'll come back looking like grilled suya if we're not careful." Later that evening, Tunda's younger brother, Kunle, called with his own set of warnings. "Tunda, bros, so you're finally going back home, Omo, you better get ready. Lagos is no joke these days." "Oh, come on, Kunle. We'll be fine. It's just a 2-week vacation," Tunda replied, but Kunle was adamant. No, you don't understand. First, be careful with the Danfos. These buses will break down at any moment, and the drivers, well, let's just say their driving is more like advanced dodging. You might think it's a scene from an action movie." Tunda rolled his eyes. "We're not exactly planning on taking public buses, Kunle laughed. "Good, but also, make sure you don't dash anyone too much. You know how it is. Once they see you're from the abroad, everybody will suddenly be your cousin asking for small change. You'll be buying airtime for people you don't even know, Kunle, please. It's just a vacation. We're not planning on becoming local celebrities." Hey, that's what they all say until you get there," Kunle replied, his tone dripping with dramatic mystery. "I'm just warning you, bros. Nigeria has changed, and you'll see for yourself." After the call, Tunda and Kemi looked at each other, trying not to laugh. "This is getting ridiculous," Kemi said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Are they all just trying to scare us into staying home? It's like they're describing a whole different country," Tunda replied, shaking his head. "We've already been warned about the sun, the food, the buses, and even random blessings on the street. I'm half expecting someone to tell us to bring our own oxygen next." As if on cue, Kemi's friend Yevon called, her voice filled with excited concern. "Kemi, are you sure you're ready for this? You know Nigeria has changed a lot. The traffic alone, my sister, it's like an Olympic sport. You might spend half your trip in a car going nowhere." "Yevon, we're prepared," Kemi assured her, though she was finding it hard to keep a straight face. And please, Kemi, don't wear anything too abroad when you're out and about, Yevonde continued. No shorts, no sleeveless tops, none of those Hollywood clothes. You don't want people thinking you're lost. Kemi had to hold back her laughter. Noted, Yevonde, no Hollywood clothes. That night, as they packed, Kemi added a few extra sun hats, just in case. Tunda slipped in an industrial-sized bottle of sunscreen, more out of respect for Auntie Biola's passionate warning than actual belief in its necessity. Are we really going to need all this? Tunda asked, eyeing the ever-growing pile of essentials that had been recommended. At this rate, we'll be prepared for anything, Kemi replied, rolling her eyes. Honestly, with all these warnings, I'm starting to think we're preparing for some kind of covert mission instead of a vacation. Tunda grinned, pulling her into a quick hug. At least we'll have stories to tell when we get back, and maybe some sunburn to prove Auntie Biola right. They both laughed, finally letting go of some of the worries their family had piled onto them. After all, they were going back to the place they'd once called home. How different could it really be? Little did they know, in Lagos, 3 young men, Boniface, Lawal, and Ojo, were plotting a welcome they'd never forget. And while Tunda and Kemi prepared for sunburns, long-lost relatives, and crowded markets, Shocking 85 was gearing up with sunglasses, overconfidence, and a laughably disastrous plan. Chapter 3. A warm Nigerian welcomed the moment Tunda and Kemi stepped off the plane and onto Nigerian soil. They felt it. A mix of nostalgia, excitement, and a slight tinge of anxiety. They hadn't seen their homeland in 30 years, and they were eager to reconnect, yet uncertain what to expect. Their hearts were racing with anticipation as they made their way through the crowded Lagos airport, and as they approached the arrivals hall, the noise reached a new level of frenzy. As soon as they stepped through the doors, the scene before them was nothing short of a family reunion, wedding procession, and carnival combined. A dozen relatives, some they recognized, some they vaguely remembered, and others they couldn't place at all, burst into cheers. Arms flailed, voices shouted in joyous pandemonium, and Tunda could have sworn he saw a small child waving a placard that read, "Welcome home, Uncle Tunda and Auntie Kemi. Tunda, my son." A woman's voice boomed from the crowd before a figure burst forward and engulfed him in a bear hug. It was Auntie Ngozi, whom Tunda hadn't seen since his teenage years. She was still as energetic and boisterous as he remembered, if not more so. "Auntie, it's so good to see you," Tunda gasped, fighting for breath under her embrace. "Oh, you look just like your father," she declared, squeezing him again. "Except he never wore such fine clothes." She laughed, gesturing at his travel outfit, a modest yet carefully chosen ensemble that Auntie Ngozi seemed to think was fit for a king. Meanwhile, Kemi was swept into her own whirlwind of hugs, kisses, and excited exclamations. Cousins, old friends, and distant relatives all clamored around her, each one eager to catch up or introduce themselves. At one point, a young woman introduced herself as Lara, your mother's cousin's niece, a title so convoluted Kemi simply smiled and nodded, deciding to untangle the family tree later. As they tried to navigate the sea of family, they felt a strange, vaguely menacing gaze on them. Tunda glanced up and spotted 3 young men lurking near the corner, each one donning the most suspicious disguises he'd ever seen. Sunglasses, baseball caps, and bandanas wrapped around their necks. It was as if they'd Googled how to look inconspicuous and picked the first 3 items that came up. Unbeknownst to Tunda and Kemi, these were none other than Boniface, Lawal, and Ojo, the self-proclaimed masterminds behind Shocking 85. They had spotted the Bamadel couple's arrival and were now attempting to remain unseen while plotting their first move. Boniface whispered, "All right, remember the plan. Stage 1. Blend in and observe the targets, but they're just there. Right in front of us. Why are we observing them?" Lawal asked, glancing at Tunda's family who seemed completely oblivious to their would-be kidnappers. "Because that's what professionals do," Boniface hissed. "Besides, we need to assess the situation." At that very moment, a goat, who had somehow wandered into the airport terminal, thanks to an unusually lax security day, ambled up to Boniface and started sniffing at his pant leg. He froze, eyeing the goat nervously, but when he tried to shoo it away, the goat simply butted him in the shin with what could only be described as casual aggression. "Ah, shoo, shoo," Boniface muttered, attempting to kick the air in a way that wouldn't attract attention but also didn't particularly scare the goat. Lawal stifled a laugh, though he didn't stifle it very well, and soon his snickers turned into full-on giggles. Ojo, who was supposed to be their lookout, was now crouched on the floor, clutching his stomach as he tried, and failed, to hold in his laughter. Meanwhile, Tunda and Kemi were finally making their way through the throng of family, smiling and hugging, blissfully unaware of Shocking 85's antics nearby. Just then, Auntie Biola made her way to the front of the crowd, clutching a small basket filled with cola nuts. She reached up and pressed one into Tunda's hand, nodding with approval. "Ah, Tunda, you've returned a true Nigerian man," she declared, beaming with pride. "Here, take this cola nut and break it with your wife for blessings." Tunda and Kemi exchanged a glance. They vaguely remembered the cola nut tradition from childhood, though neither of them had ever really done it themselves. Still, they went along with Auntie Biola, cracking the bitter nut and trying their best to chew without grimacing. The family cheered and clapped, thrilled by the ceremonial display. Behind them, Shocking 85 remained crouched, muttering their plans to each other while watching the couple like hawks. "Let's just go for it now," Lawal whispered, bouncing on his heels in nervous excitement. "Patience, Lawal," Boniface replied, though he was starting to look a little less certain himself. "We have to pick the perfect moment." But before they could act, Kemi's cousin Ayo, a tall, exuberant man who worked as a tour guide, strode forward, grabbed Tunda's suitcase, and announced, "No worries, cousins. I'll take you to your hotel myself. You're in safe hands." Lawal slapped his forehead. "Great, now they have a bodyguard." Ojo, still nursing his aching sides from laughter, looked at Boniface and sighed. "Maybe we should just give up. These people are surrounded by, like, an army." "No," Boniface whispered, glaring at his bumbling comrades. "Shocking 85 does not give up. We'll find another chance. Besides, once this army disperses, we'll be back on track." As the family and Tunda and Kemi started moving out of the arrivals hall, Shocking 85 scrambled to follow from a safe distance, ducking behind every column and plant pot they could find. They looked more like kids playing hide and seek than aspiring masterminds, but that didn't deter them. Little did Tunda and Kemi know, their chaotic welcome to Nigeria was only the beginning. With family, friends, and 3 amateur kidnappers trailing their every move, their 2-week vacation was bound to be unforgettable.